offices down here in Transparency Act, which is coming. And if you haven't heard to effect January 1st, 2024, you need to take a second and just listen to what we've got to tell you here to educate you here about this upcoming law. It was passed in January 1st, 2021, but the reporting requirements start January 1st of this year. And what is it? Well, it affects just about every small, medium-sized business and startup in the state of Texas. And what it is starting January 1st, 2024, we have to tell the federal government, which is the new entity is called FinCEN. I may mess that up a little bit. It's a mouthful. FinCEN kind of sounds like something from the Terminator, but FinCEN is coming, and they're going to aggregate all of the owners and control persons for every single entity in the United States. And so, effective January 1st, 2024, unless you are exempted, your reporting company, you have to tell FinCEN who your owners are and who's in control starting in January. Now, to understanding who are in the state of Texas right now to report to the Secretary of State who the governing body is, and the IRS finds out who the owners are for those that properly do their taxes. But this is going to allow for the government to better understand the ownership, and really is trying to understand where some of the dark money goes, making sure that with regard to financial smuggling, those sort of things, it will be helpful from a law enforcement standpoint. And that's the reason they've enacted this. But let's also be honest, once the federal government is able to see the ownership of every single company, there's going to be ways that they use this to their advantage to some extent. There's going to be ways that maybe third parties can get a hold of this information. So it's a big change of what's coming. Again, for the Corporate Transparency Act, which again starts January 1st, if you're a reporting company, you have to file. Now, for public companies and those that already have reporting requirements with regard to ownership, this doesn't apply. You're already dealing with it. With regard to nonprofit companies, you don't have to report it. Again, there's another way that the IRS gets that information through your Form 990s that you file. But with regard to small businesses, there is a small limited exception we want you to know. And I've got to read this just to make sure I get this right. But if you have more than 20 full-time employees, if you have more than $5 million, $5 million in gross receipt or sales, that's not net profit, that's revenue, and you operate a physical office within the United States, then you are also exempt. And I will tell you that that gets into the medium-sized businesses, but it doesn't fall you out of for all the small businesses that are out there. I mean, most of the small businesses we deal with, they're 20, employees. They're usually less, and then they're not really at the $5 million of gross receipts or revenue. But for some of the medium-sized businesses, you would qualify in that, which is great for the startups that are in there. That's something that, again, is going to capture them. And so if you are a reporting company, going into a little bit more detail, you have to provide to FinCEN the beneficial owners, and you're going to have to provide their legal name, their address. If they've got a social, you have to give them their social. If they've got a TIN, you have to give them their TIN. If it's a company, you're going to have to give them their EIN of who the beneficial owners are. And then also, who are those that have substantial control. And substantial control is somebody that owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interest. And then also there are certain company officers, CEO, COO, corporate counsel, that we're also going to have to tie ourselves to each of these companies, these reporting companies that are out there for it. So January 1st, 2024, things are going to be different. Now, if you're still with us here, let me give you some good news with this. Number one, we don't know how to report it yet. I mean, it's November, and they still haven't told us how we're going to report it. For entities that were created before January 1st, 2024, so before next year, you have the entire year in order to put that information to FinCEN, which, again, we don't even know how to do that yet. If you form an entity after January 1st, 2024, then you have 30 days to then file that information with FinCEN. And again, we here at the South Texas Business Lawyers, we're paying attention because we'll make sure that any entrepreneurs, small business owners that need to have entities formed in the new year, we're going to be ready to comply with this, but they just haven't told us how to comply yet. So anyway, it's something good to know. Now, the other thing to know as well is if there's a change in the ownership or those that have control or those company applicants, then you also have 30 days to give the updated information. So this is really creating a process to make sure that the government knows almost real time who the owners are, who's in control, who's running every single company that's out there in some form or fashion. So what happens if you don't comply? Because I've been asked this a lot. We've been talking about this for months because this big change is coming. It's a lot of, of paperwork and burden for our small business owners. If you don't comply, as of right now, if you have a negligent violation, which means you watch this video right now, you know about it, but you know what, you just forget, you're not quite sure, it gets busy, there's no civil or criminal penalties. If there's a willful violation of that, which means if you're smuggling money or laundering money through your business, and so you choose not to report, there are certain civil and criminal procedures. So it's or violations. It's not a gotcha for our small business owners, but it is something that's big. We expect, a potential to have the implementation of that delayed into mid next year. Don't know for sure. Who knows? I mean, it could come out any day now. There's been some further comments in the last 6 weeks that I've seen people talking about it with the government. But it's something that we're going to be prepared to do. We'll produce more information so that way you can help yourself with regard to these reporting requirements, because it is coming and it is something that in order to be compliant, you're going to have to do out there. And so what could you do now, between now and whenever we can give you that next line of information? Get ready. Make sure that your ownership, the current current addresses, contact information. If you're in an LLC and you have multiple owners that are part of that, you already have somebody's social probably for a K1. You may want to make sure you have that information. If you're with have a corporation that you're running that is going to be a reporting entity, you're going to make sure your stock register is up to date. Maybe pull your shareholders or stockholders to make sure that you have that information, because you will be having to report that into the new year. But outside of that, it's just now wait. You now know, if you've been following us, this is coming. We'll talk more about it, but there's more information that we all need in order to be compliant. We always love coming on here and providing this education. If you're watching us for the first time here for whatever reason live, or maybe you're catching this on a replay, make sure you join all of our social media. We at the South Texas Business Lawyers are here to educate, support, and advise every small, medium business and startup founder in Texas. And we do that through a lot of this free education on our social media platforms. We have a private Facebook group where we do deal decoders every 2 weeks, where we basically look at case studies on how we set up deals for our clients that can help you in what you're doing. And we try to make sure that you can arm yourself with knowledge so you can be proactive. And then when you do need us, we're here to advise you and your company in any of their legal needs and legal situations or opportunities that you're addressing. Really appreciate those that have watched us here. We'll see you next week when we do our next deal decoder. That's going to be fun. So see